Again, I'm Gwen McCullough. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the chair of WTS Puget Sound Chapter Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Along with Joanna Valencia, Brooke C. Barton, Rebecca Blankenship, and our new member, Margot Inez Dawes. We want to welcome you all to today's lunchtime pay equity discussion. A quick review of the agenda for today. We'll go over some Zoom how-tos. We'll make some acknowledgements, reiterate the concept of pay equity, and discuss associated racial disparities via a poll. We'll do a high-level review of the Washington Equal Pay and Opportunities Act, and then we'll turn the floor over to Jesse Green to hear about how SDOT evaluates pay equity. We plan to carve out about 10 minutes at the end of the discussion for questions and answers and further discussion. And if you have any questions, please put those in the chat. And folks will, we will mention those and address those as we change topics. If anyone is unfamiliar with Zoom, by hovering the cursor in the lower left-hand corner of your screen, you'll see the video camera and microphone icons. Please keep yourself on mute, meaning the red strike through on the icon, for the speakers to be seen and heard. In order to optimize seeing the slideshow and the speakers, put yourself in side-by-side view by hovering your cursor in the upper right-hand corner of your screen to select the view side by side. And as mentioned, the chat will be monitored for questions and we'll address them prior to major topic breaks. WTS welcomes everyone to come as they are, and we celebrate diversity of identity and experience. This is a psychologically safe space to discuss difficult topics like white male supremacy culture, institutionalized racism, and our place in it. Part of the purpose of these discussions is to get better at managing discomfort, not to avoid it. Members of the committee will eject individuals who display harmful content or behavior. It's Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. AANHPI Month is observed annually in May to celebrate the contributions that generations of AAPIs have had to American history, society, and culture. This celebratory red banner, reading Advancing Leaders Through Opportunity, has been curated by the Federal Asian Pacific American Council, the FAPAC, to educate the public about AAPIs and celebrate AANHPI Heritage Month. The National Partners Work Group on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, the MMIW, and Family Advisors are organizing a National Week of Action this week, May 1st through the 7th, 2023, to call the nation and the world to action in honor of missing and murdered Indigenous women. Please check out the link that will be put in the chat. And now on to equal pay. Equal Pay Day represents how far into the year an average woman, quote unquote, must work to earn what a white man made the year before. The observed AAPI Equal Pay Day is today, May 3rd, though the actual calculated date will be discussed later in this presentation. Now we're going to have a poll. Please answer the poll on your screen and click submit. The Equal Pay Day calendar now encompasses a broader cross-section of women, including those who work part-time or seasonally, to represent a more accurate picture of how the gender pay gap impacts diverse communities. The latest US Census figures show that the average woman who works full-time is paid on average just 84% of the typical man's pay. Current research shows this number is most accurate for women who work full-time year-round. Women earners who work part-time and or seasonally are paid 77 cents for every dollar paid to men. The following are the days this year when women and women of color catch up to men's pay from 2022. White Women's Equal Pay Day is observed on March 14th. Asian American and Pacific Islander Equal Pay Day is April 5th. Black or African American Equal Pay Day is July 27th. Latinx Equal Pay Day is October 5th. And Native American Alaska Native Equal Pay Day is November 30th. The Washington State Equal Pay and Opportunities Act. The act prohibits gender pay discrimination and promotes fairness among workers by addressing business practices that contribute to income disparities between genders. The act states that it is unlawful to base an employee's pay or career advancement opportunities on their gender. Employees also have the protected right to discuss their wages and have the right to access certain wage and salary information. The act also states that gender cannot be a reason for pay differences between employees with similar jobs. The following, and note these, are acceptable factors for differences in pay. Differences in education, training or experience, seniority, merit or work performance, measuring earnings by quantity or quality of production, regional differences in compensation, differences in local minimum wages, job-related factors consistent with business need. The Act also puts the burden of proof on the employer for compliance, not the employee. What the Act does not do is it does not standardize or otherwise provide guidance to employers on appropriate pay equity methods or practices. And hopefully the link to the Washington State Equal Pay and Opportunities Act will be put into the chat for everyone who's interested. And so now I would like to have you join me in welcoming Jessie Green, the Division Director of People, Culture, and Logistics from the City of Seattle, Department of Transportation. Thanks so much for joining us, Jessie. I'm gonna spotlight you, and then I'm gonna stop my video if it's okay with you. I can stay on with you if you'd like, but while you're talking, I'll have my video stopped, and then you can talk to us a little bit more about how you, in your position, have developed a procedure for pay equity evaluation.
There we go. Can you hear me? Thumbs up. Thank you, Margot. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jesse Green. Like Gwen said, I'm the Division Director for People, Culture, and Logistics for SDOT, the Seattle Department of Transportation. And I want to call out before we get too far into this, as a city government employee, I'm used to speaking in acronyms. And so I'm going to try my best to explain what those mean, but I apologize if I hit an acronym that you don't know, feel free to put it in the chat and we can respond back to that. But I want to start with a little bit of introduction and tell you a little bit about my background. I use he, him, his pronouns. I identify as white. I've been with SDOT for about 5 years. It'll be 5 years in June. And that was my first role in any level of government. Before this, I've worked in human resources for about 20 years or so, since the early 2000s, and I started in talent acquisition and recruitment. So I'm very familiar with that work. And then I've worked through employee and labor relations and contract negotiation and things like that, now into my current role. When I started with SDOT, I was hired as the manager of what we call strategic human resources. And so that includes our business partners and leave administration and some things like that. And now I oversee that entire department of SDOT. We're a group of about 35 or 36 or so people supporting about 1,400 or so permanent and temporary employees at SDOT. Before I get into it, I really want to thank Kate and Margot and Gwen and everyone else on the DEI team here for inviting me to come and speak to you guys. I'm really humbled and happy to do it. I'm really proud of the work that we've done at SDOT over the last 5 years. But I want to call out and recognize that this work is not over, and we definitely do not have all the answers to solve pay equity. But I feel like we're making good progress, and I'll talk a little bit more about the ways that we've done that, and happy to answer questions or discuss more at the end of the presentation. So when I started at SDOT, it was really clear to me right from the start kind of how much flexibility there was in the pay structure. For any of you that work at the city or maybe work in city government, about 85% of city employees are members of one of our many bargaining unions that we partner with. And so a lot of the pay that those people see is really negotiated through all of our bargaining process, right? They're step by step. And part of it is that it's great because it really eliminates any gender bias or anything like that, but it's based on seniority. And I think at a time that was really thought to be the best way to do it, because it's really just based on kind of that one single factor of how long you've been in the job. But I think now, and some of the things that I'll talk about here over the next 10 or 15 minutes are about the ways that we've really come to learn and to see that it's some of those structural things that are behind that really create that inequity. And some of those pay structures that we've got in place haven't been great at solving those problems. So like I said, when I started at SDOT, there was a huge range, right? One of the biggest problems that we saw was in our out-of-class opportunities. We call them OOCs. If you're not familiar, out-of-class opportunities are a great tool that we at the city and other organizations have to really allow folks to fill in for a higher level position. If someone is out on leave, if a position is vacated because someone has left the organization, if someone themselves has taken a sabbatical or moved into a different role, it gives that great opportunity for some upward mobility for someone in maybe a staff level position to act as a manager for a period of time. At the City of Seattle, we've got 90-day assignments, we've got 6-month assignments, up to a year assignments. And so it's a great way to build that experience, right? And create that talent pool for people to grow. But one of the first things that became clear is that it was really wide open. It was really across the board about what people were being paid in those categories. We've got a class of employees at SDOT that we call APEX SAM, APEX -SAM, and that stands for Accountability Pay for Executives / Strategic Advisors and Managers. And so that's a whole big mouthful, but it's really our strategic advisor, manager, and executive level employees. And the way that the city operates, this is not just SDOT, but all across the city of Seattle and many organizations too, is there's a wide range of pay that is allotted for those positions. And so it may be, anywhere from $30 to $50 an hour. And everybody that's in those classifications will fall somewhere along that range. And so what I learned is that in these Apex SAM categories, in these higher level executive manager, strategic advisor positions, it was really just up to the manager that was hiring those positions to decide where they felt that someone belonged in that range. And so what that really created was a lot of disparity. You know, we looked at the data behind that, and I think to no one's surprise, we saw that white males were overwhelmingly being paid higher in those categories than some of their counterparts. Some of the BIPOC community, women, people of color that were working in those positions doing very similar work were being paid lower. So we really wanted to take some immediate steps to address that. So one of the first years, we really kind of took a Band-Aid approach, admittedly, and we took our budget for increases. We ran some metrics to decide, you know, which women and people of color were really below the median, below where they needed to be, and we addressed those issues specifically by giving them, you know, X% raise to bring them kind of back up to the median of where the other people were going. It was great, right? It was a great and immediate fix. It helped to address some of those issues, but it really didn't solve any of those structural problems that we were finding that created this inequity from the start. And so what we did is we really, my team put a lot of emphasis on this out of class process and really going back to the personnel rules that we've got for the city of Seattle, going back to our labor agreements and things like that, all of those things that are in place that we have to work within those confines. And we created a process that really put a lot more structure into that out of class, right? So we took away much of the ability for managers to place people where they wanted to on that. And I want to be clear that I don't think anybody was doing anything maliciously, but everyone was really very supportive of their own people, right? And they were working in a silo, and people that they had built relationships with, people that they had worked with before, right? Which is a lot of what we see in the white supremacy culture and how this impacts pay equity. So we took that portion away. Really, we became the arbiters of what people, and we as the HR department, of what people would make in these out-of-class assignments. And so we went with the personnel rules, which were very clear about a % increase that would be based on someone's primary pay for the amount of work that they were doing in those out-of-class positions. So that was hard. We got a lot of pushback. We had a lot of real unhappy people that said, hey, wait a minute, you know, somebody over here that did this 2 years ago was getting paid, you know, X, and you're only telling me that I need to get paid Y. But we were very clear, right? We met with our senior leaders. We told them why we were doing this, what we found in the data, how we felt like this would help. And we really got that buy-in. And so once we explained that why, it became easy for people to get on board. So what we saw over a period of time, again, this is not work that happens overnight, but what we saw over a period of time is those out-of-class assignments really kind of were funneled into compliance, where we wanted to see them in that range, where people were being paid the same amount of wages or getting the same amount of increase for the work that they were doing. We felt like that was a much better way to handle it. And really the impact that that had was on the next level, right? So the next thing that we looked at is people that were in these permanent Apex SAM positions and how they were being paid, right? And as I said before, these out of class assignments that people were in is a great stepping stone for people to move into those permanent strategic advisor, manager, executive positions. And what we have found when the out of class pay was all across the board, people would move into that, you know, Gwen, for example, right? Gwen would be in an out of class assignment and be making $40 an hour, let's just say, as a round number. And then when she was competed for and was awarded the full-time position, we would think, oh, well, we want to give her a little bit of a bump for her hard work as well. And so then that would, you know, place her a little bit above that. And then the next person would come along in the out of class and say, well, Gwen's making this, so my person needs to make this. So what we found is that through tightening up that out of class process, it really gave us that structure for tightening up the permanent positions as well. And so we're in year 2 of that work with the permanent positions. And, you know, it was kind of a similar thing. There was a lot of flexibility. There was a lot of autonomy on managers and directors in the SDOT organization to determine where they felt like people should be placed. And a lot of it, naturally, again, it was just that natural unconscious bias that comes into it, that white supremacy culture of these are the people that I know, I want to take care of them, they're doing a good job, that's why I'm promoting them. So that was kind of that thought process. But it really, like I said at the beginning, gave us really a inequitable environment for pay. So one of the biggest factors in that permanent position role is that we in HR, when someone would come to us and want to increase the pay for one of their employees, there was a process where they would need to come to their HR business partner and they would say, you know, Gwen's doing a really good job. I think that we need to give Gwen a raise. The work that she's doing for SDOT is the greatest work ever. We couldn't survive without it. The sun would not rise tomorrow if Gwen was not working here. And we really need to pay her this rate. And we found that the next division director would come along and they would give us a very similar story about their employee. The greatest work that they've ever done, SDOT would not survive without it. We need to make sure that we pay this person this rate. And so it became very clear to us that people were siloed, right? Division directors were siloed, and they were looking at their individual team, and no one was really looking at the enterprise-wide department, looking across all of SDOT. And so we really took on that challenge to make sure that we were looking at that for consistency's sake. So what we did is we took the exams that the city has for those Apex SAM categories, and as I said before, right, it's a pretty wide range. And we set tiers. We looked at where people were currently placed within that pay band, and we in HR with our executive leadership team set some tiers that we felt like were kind of benchmarks, right, for people that were new to that position.
Jesse, I think we lost you. Keep talking. Let's see if we can hear you. He can't hear us. Okay. No audio for Jesse. Uh-oh. Let's, oh, I'm getting a interesting. Is anybody else getting a security alert in their meeting information?
Nope.
No? Okay. So Jesse, why don't, I know this is going to make you additionally are you on? Can you talk? Nope. No. Can you turn off your video? Looks like he's reconnect. Okay. Let's see if Jesse can come back off of mute.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello, okay. Oh my gosh. Okay, everything good?
Yep. And if you go out
Yeah.
again, it may just be that you have to put, turn off your camera.
Yeah. So I'll keep plowing ahead. So what we really found, right, is that people were looking at these decisions independently. So we created some tiers that we felt like were appropriate for people to be placed at, right, based on the performance that they have in the position. So really trying to eliminate kind of those old structures of just being seniority based or anything like that, and really address people's performance in the role and how they were doing in the position. The other component of that I mentioned too before that we really wanted to address was that people before had been working in that silo, right? It was one division director determining what their person would make. And we really felt like that was ripe for creating that unconscious bias, creating that halo bias that we see and that we think of as a leader for the people that work on my team. I'm very proud of them. I think they do great work. And we all feel that way too. And so Doug Sisler is our talent acquisition manager. Doug's a really experienced leader in the HR space and in that talent acquisition space. And so he had the idea and introduced a system where all of these division directors would get together. And literally we did it through a Teams meeting. We would have 15 or 20 division directors in the room. And we would go through and talk about where we felt like our people would be. We would accept feedback from the other division directors. And it really set up that system where people had that enterprise view of what pay looked like in the organization. So no longer was it just siloed in their group, but it was that entire organization. And I think it really opened up a lot of people's eyes to see where folks were fitting into that pay structure and into those pay bands that we created. So at the beginning of this year, January and February, we actually just completed the second year, the second cycle of doing this process of going through and reviewing folks in this Apex SAM category. Managers would speak to all the great work that their people were doing, and you know, we would discuss whether or not it was appropriate to move this person up to the next pay band, whether it was from that entry level to the fully performing pay band or from the fully performing to the excelling pay band. And our intent too is that this will be loosely tied into our evaluation process and will really reflect the performance and the great work that that person has done in all of those categories. What we're seeing initially, even in just 2 years, is a real willingness for managers and directors to be very honest and actually discuss pay in ways that we haven't before, not only with their own people on their team, but with their colleagues, with their other division directors. And I think that that's created a real environment that leads to much more transparency and fairness. And so I'm really excited as we move forward. Even in this second year, we had a little bit of a check and adjust period where leaders came back to us and brought back feedback and said, hey, you know, I think we might need to look at adding a fourth layer, a fourth tier, instead of just the 3, because we think it might fit in better and it might better create the structure that we're looking for. And so we were able to do that. We were able to make that change, of course, you know, still within the confines of the city pay bands and with the city personnel rules, but we're able to add this extra layer of communication and practice to make sure that things are moving into a more equitable framework. Like I said, this work is not done. This is work that we're going to continue working through. And we're looking for other structures too that contribute to this pay and equity that we see, you know, not only in the city, not only in SDOT, but of course across the whole Puget Sound region and across workforce in general. So I hope that helps. I'm happy to take questions or discuss further my thoughts. I also welcome your thoughts and your ideas. Like I said, I don't have all the right answers, but I am proud of the progress that we're making.
Thank you so much. I am not particularly seeing, so we are getting a question. And that question, since we're going a little bit ahead of schedule, and I hope that you have heard all of the electronic applause that is happening, Jesse. So how do you keep that discussion among managers from feeling like a Hunger Games scenario? So I may encourage Emily to come off of mute and provide some additional context for her question.
And it was sort of related. So Margot had a question a little just right before me in the chat was, you know, what are the discussions based on? People's performance, based on supervisors or leaders' perspectives, or employee, you know, their formal performance reviews, or some combination. And then my sort of follow-on question is like, how do you keep that conversation from feeling like, you know, everybody's gotta, like, you know, be out for themselves or the people they're trying to.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And honestly, there was a lot of hesitance from our other division directors the first time that we did this. And, you know, like I said, Doug Sisler, our talent acquisition leader, really led this process. And I remember talking to him about it after he had met with the division directors. And I know that, you know, to be totally honest, him and I think underestimated the amount of hesitance there would be from folks on this, because they were afraid that it would turn into something like that. And I think it took like the first 2 90-minute meetings of Doug meeting with our division directors to really just explain the process and explain the why and explain why we were doing these things in order to get everybody to kind of have that light bulb moment and say, oh, okay, all right, yeah, let's give this a shot, and we'll see how it works. I think to answer your question directly, the good thing that we're doing is we've gone into these discussions with the structure already in place. So we're not looking at like a zero-sum situation where if I give Gwen a 5% increase, that means that I don't have anything to give Emily, right? So it's not a situation where there's like one pot of gold and we've got to hand out gold coins, and once we're done, we're done. We've already got that structure built in. And like I said, that structure is already within the pay bands that we have at the City of Seattle. And it's already worked into the budget that we've planned for our SDOT labor budget. And so we're able to really look at it as, how do we evaluate each person's performance? How do we evaluate the work that they're doing, the scope of the work that they're doing, the body of the work that they're doing, as an enterprise, instead of, it's this person gets it, but this person doesn't. So it's a great question. And this second year that we've done it went a lot better than the first year, because there was a lot of real concern about that. This is something new. This is something very different that people were uncomfortable with. And Gwen, like you talked about at the top of the meeting, right? Creating a space where it's okay to be a little bit uncomfortable and kind of work through that. We had to work through that on our leadership team and get folks on board with discussing those things.
And then can you also talk a little bit about like what is the basis of the discussions in terms of, is it just what people already know, or are formal evaluations brought into the conversation as well?
No, it's really asking. So if I've got someone on my team, right, in preparation for these sessions, what we do is we'll put together the list of all the people that fall into this Apex SAM category, and kind of to further explain it, for strategic advisors, we've got level 1s, level 2s, level 3s at the city. Same thing with managers, manager 1s, level 2s, level 3s. And so people are slotted into those positions based on the work that they do. And so in preparation for the meeting, we send out, those lists of here's everybody in these classifications. And as a leader, I'm tasked with coming into that prepared to discuss my folks and people that I think might be ready to move up to that next tier, or if I think that people are at the correct level for the work that they're doing. And so I go in and talk about what I want to do, ask for feedback, get feedback from the other leaders that work closely with this person, that know their work, and then ultimately determine where I want to move forward, with that pay, and if we're ready to move up to the next tier or not. And then that really, I can take that information as a leader, and that really gives me a great starting point to have those discussions with that employees about development plans, about growth plans, about where they want to grow their career. And so again, our hope is that leaders will take that and use that as a platform to build on, to help that employee grow, gain experience, get training, get leadership development if that's the direction that they want to go in.
And I want to double down on what you just said. I really want to double down on what you just said in terms of, it means the manager of that person has begun or encourages the staff person and employee to put together a development plan and to discuss the development plan with the employee. I don't,
yeah,
and that is part of the process of the employee's evaluation, and made as a standard. And the making of that as a standard, that each employee will have a development plan, or if they don't have one, then they don't, like the carrot is put in the right place. That if you don't have a development plan, there's nowhere for us to go. That we need to, in order for me to do, to discuss these various places and places where you need to improve, or things where I already think that you're excelling, there needs to be a place to start from so that we can have a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you calling that out. And that's part of the structure, right? That all of this is, that we're trying to address. And again, we're not perfect, I think there's some managers that are better than this, better at this than others. But one of our tasks in my group is to grow those managers to be able to grow their employees. And this is just, this is not the answer, but this is one tool, right, to help that growth and to help get people in the direction that they wanted to go to. And so it is pleasant. It's been a pleasant surprise how much movement we've seen on this in just the 2 years that we've done this. And I know that as we continue to adjust and as we continue to check and our progress and determine what those next steps are, I'm really excited about what the next few years are going to look like too.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jesse. We're getting to we've transitioned right into the Q&A portion of this. And so I encourage people to take yourself off mute, put your question in the chat, however you would like, in order to, if you have questions on what already has been discussed here, and or if you have feedback or ideas related to this question. So in terms of centering equity within work, we need to talk about how process specifically includes the people that are most impacted by process that is happening to them, and or people who have historically been excluded from processes that impact them. So how does SDOT address that in its framework? And then also, I would like to challenge folks or ask the question of, do folks have any ideas for how, in relation to the elements that are identified in the Washington State Pay and Opportunities Act, that there are acceptable factors for differences in pay, including differences in education, training, or experience, seniority that Jesse briefly mentioned previously, merit, work performance, regional differences in compensation, differences in local minimum wages, or job-related factors consistent with business needs. So some of these things we can control, and some of these we can't. Some of these elements are also very much affected by white supremacy culture and systemic and institutionalized racism. So how do we focus improvement of pay equity process to focus on sort of dismantling the racism associated with most institutions that are performing pay? And what would be some of do folks have ideas on that for discussion?
Do you want me to take a shot at that first question, and then we can see if there's discussion about that?
I think that'd be great.
Yeah. So at SDOT, I know that there's some SDOT folks on this call here. I think that this is one area where we've taken some steps and we've got some growth to do, to be honest with you, in involving and making sure that the people impacted are the people in the room. We have a lot of resources available to us in HR. We've got a very strong change team. We've got what is called, we call it the HR Roundtable, and it's a group of folks made up of people from the different employee resource groups within SDOT. We've also got what we call the TEF, the Transportation Equity Framework, which touches on all matter of transportation. It's not just HR. There's a few pieces of HR that are on that, and we're working closely with our partners in our Office of Equity and Inclusion group to address things like that. A couple of the things that we're looking at right now are really aimed at those structural things that get us to that pay and equity down the road, right? Our hiring processes, our recruitment processes, who we have manning our interview panels, making sure that those folks are trained well, right? We're getting set to launch some mandatory training across SDOT that's going to include anti-bias training, subconscious bias, all those sorts of things that kind of come up, like I talked about the halo effect earlier. All of those things that come up in that interview process that that we need to eliminate that bias in there to get people on that path to grow into those positions that they want to grow into. And so a lot of it is just working outside of the bounds of that traditional HR structure, right, within the organization to make sure that those folks are included and able to contribute in whatever way they're able to these projects that we're working on.
Thank you. Okay. Let's see, any other questions or let's see.
I see a
Emily,
question from Kate, if you'd like
Are
me.
you doing the chat?
Sure,
Or do
yeah.
you want me to?
Well,
Okay.
yeah, sure. Yeah, so from Q&A, does education level and certifications factor into salary discussion? And what is employee feedback so far? And is there a sense of fairness?
Yeah, so to address the first part, you know, we don't honestly look at education level or certifications when we're having those discussions about salary. And mainly that's because that's already been addressed in the minimum requirements for the positions that we've got. As any of you guys, any of you folks that are in government, you know, may know, there's a lot of very specific classifications and the requirements for those classifications. Again, it's that structure that we're working in. And so depending on what the role is, there are educational requirements. There are certification requirements for some of those jobs. And so to get into one of those positions, those needs have already been met. Those requirements have already been met. And so we don't necessarily compare and look when we're looking from person A to person B and saying, well, this person has this degree and this person doesn't. If they're doing the same work, we're rating them the same and we're looking at them the same as far as that body of work is concerned. The employee feedback so far, like I said, this is year 2, but I think that it has been positive really because of what I talked about earlier, that it's forcing or giving leaders the information that they need to go back and have those honest conversations with their employees. And the sense that I've heard, the feedback that I've heard is that the employees in this Apex SAM category, many of them understand and know, if their managers have done a good job at explaining what this process looks like, understand how it works, right? They understand the structure of those tiers and that that's where people are being placed at, and it's not all across the board like it used to be. And, you know, Gwen, to your point, which you mentioned before of that development plan, you know, we had a situation where there was somebody that after the first year didn't get the increase that they were hoping for. And that manager had a really good, strong conversation about it with them, about here's the areas for opportunity that I think that you've got in your work. Let's put together that development plan. This person acted on that. They took an active role in that development plan and really, you know, really performed really well, really got some additional training, demonstrated some great strategic thinking, worked on some really great projects at the city, and, you know, earned that pay increase the second time around that we did it. And so, yeah, so it's like I said, it's a check and adjust. We're learning as we go with this process, but so far it's been pretty positive.
Thank you. Next question, how has the hybrid virtual work virtual work environment changed the approach to implementing these strategies at all?
Yeah, you know, I don't know. I'm trying to think of kind of indirect ways that it might have. It hasn't. I mean, the hybrid work environment and kind of what we went through in the pandemic with many of these people in this Apex SAM category, most often being folks that were able to work from home, whether fully remote or in a hybrid environment now. You know, there's challenges that went along with that from a people management perspective. But we really worked to provide managers and folks with the tools that they needed on that. But it really didn't change the structure of pay and what we're looking for. You know, we really didn't treat folks that were working a hybrid environment any differently than folks that were working fully remote at the time or people that were working on site. We really wanted to focus it. And part of that was the great thing about having that group instead of those siloed conversations, is that we were able to reduce any bias that was given to anybody in any particular category. So we really didn't see it impact this a whole lot.
Okay, next is what were you most surprised by during this process?
You know, I think going back to that first time that we did this, I think there's two aspects of it, right? The first time that we did this, I was really surprised by the reluctance or the hesitance or the uncertainty, I think, from the other leaders. And it really kind of drove home to me the positionality of the work that I do and the position that I'm in kind of how I approach this problem versus people, honestly, that have worked in city government for 25 years and haven't, you know, been faced with some of these questions or some of these concerns before until just very recently. But we were able to get through that. Like I said, it took a few meetings of really explaining the whys and what we were looking to accomplish. But we got through that. The second thing I think that was a real pleasant surprise for me was how quickly we've been able to get people into this structure, right? We went into this knowing that because that pay was all over the board to start with, even though we were putting these tiers in place, you know, we weren't going to reduce anyone's salary to make sure that they fit into a certain tier or anything like that. At the same time, we weren't going to increase their salary to make sure that they just fit into the tier if it wasn't warranted by the work. And so we had a lot of what we called outliers in that first year that didn't quite fit perfectly into that structure. But the second year, it really was a pleasant surprise of how we were able to reduce that almost down to zero to make everybody inside of this structure. So there's been a couple real good things that have come out of it.
Okay, I think we have time for one more, so maybe two. I just saw another one sneak in. So maybe I'll just read them both to you and see what we can answer in the next minute or two. Do you do anything to promote pay transparency, as information is power in advocating for ourselves? And then have there been discussions or observations of how these internal processes may influence regional trends?
Yeah, the first part, the pay equity, you know, we tell people, like, we are the city of Seattle. This is all public information. It's taxpayer money that pays our salary, much like the folks at King County and other groups as well at the state of Washington. So there is equity and transparency in that. I think that a lot of that real transparency conversations, though, have come at that individual employee to manager level about here's the structure, here's why we're doing it, here's what it looks like, here's where you fit into this. And here's where your growth plan might be, your growth opportunities might be, if that's the area that you're looking into. But we really encourage our managers to be open and talk to folks about that, really in the context of, like Glenn talked about earlier, that development plan. Where do you see yourself? What do you want to do with the city? What do you want? What skills and things like that do you want to learn to be able to elevate that pay for yourself? The second piece, you know, I don't know. From a regional perspective, I know that we've heard from a couple other HR leaders at the city of Seattle of other large departments that have called us up and said, hey, I heard about this Apex SAM structure. Can we grab some coffee or can we talk about this? We're having some similar structures, which really makes me happy. Doug, I know, has been, you know, going around and talking to other folks about this. I'm really proud of him for that work that he's put into this and that it's being seen as a positive outside of SDOT. And again, it's a step, right? We're turning that big ship a little bit at a time, but it's a positive step.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think that's all the time we have for questions, so I'll hand it back to Glenn.
I will thank everyone here, especially Jesse and the other members of the DEI committee and the executive board. Thank you so much for joining us today for this discussion, and also thanks for being willing to engage in conversation. Please check out upcoming e-blasts about WTS events, and have a great Wednesday. Bye for now.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jesse.
Thank you, everyone. It was great speaking with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.